Western Kenya, and she's a young woman mediation ambassador. She's passionate about peacekeeping, and she is a co-founder and an director of Women Volunteer for Peace. Thank you very much. I hand over to Grace for this speech. Thank you, Grace.
Right. Thank you so much. Please, could you confirm if you can hear me? Okay, great. Jambo, everyone. It's great to, just listening to the introductions in the room. I don't know if there's an echo, but it's a bit of an echo.
I think it might be the echo from the laptop. I'll switch it off.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. So good morning, everyone. It's really good to hear from you. I was listening to the introductions and I was really amazed at the kind of people in the room, and I'm so happy that a lot of people like dancing. So Nairobi is a hub for, dancing. So please, if in Nairobi for a little bit while, please get to learn some Afro dances, the use of your legs to, make sounds and all of that. And I hope you have fun. Likewise, a dancer, and I really love dancing during my free time. So thanks so much again for the wonderful introductions. I'm really, really, really honored to be here today, even though virtually, but I'm really honored to be here, not just to share my story, but also to speak on something that has shaped my lives and many other people's lives all over the world. And especially for me, it has done so in many more ways than I could have imagined. And so for me, this is not just an environmental issue. It's about food that we eat. It's about our homes. It's about our health, and ultimately our future. Yeah. And so a little bit about me and where I come from, and sort of my background. I was born and grew up in Kisumu County. So Kisumu is the lakeside city of Kenya. So the Lake Victoria, if you guys have heard about it. So Kisumu has got a better view and access to Lake Victoria. And Kisumu is also where I studied and work and I work for this CBO called Women Volunteers for Peace that I founded in 2019. And when I was a kid, I never really imagined that something as basic as food security would become a daily struggle for my family at some point ahead in life. My parents were small-scale farmers, and our farms were so close to the lake, and still they are, some of them though. So there was a great water supply, as you can imagine, for as long as I can remember. And we never had to buy maize and vegetables, So for those who may know, maize is also called corn, and it's a staple food in Kenya as an ingredient for making ugali. It's a dish we eat almost daily in Kenya. It's our staple food. So, and I think in other African countries it has other names, but in Kenya we call it ugali. So if you haven't really tried it yet, please do try ugali and let us know how it feels. It's one of our greatest meals. So connecting to this, so every season our farm provided more than enough to feed my 8 siblings and me, including my parents. But I remember one time something started to happen very strangely in 2005. And at first it was such a small thing, where my parents were experiencing a little lower yields and planting season seemed unpredictable. Then the droughts came. Sometimes they were longer and harsher than before. Rainy seasons were either delayed or extreme, and sometimes bringing floods that washed away the entire fields and crops. And sometimes pests and diseases we had never seen before attacked our crops. And then all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I saw my parents struggling to put food on the table. They had to buy maize and vegetables, something they had never done before, not until I was a teenager. And that was when I truly understood the devastating impact of what we now call climate change. I remember asking my parents, why don't we just plant more? Like, let's plant more as, all of these changes really affect our yields. But my parents shook their heads and they were exhausted, and some of these questions they would hardly answer, even though the land was still the same, but the conditions had changed. The soil wasn't fertile anymore. The water sources were drying up. Lake Victoria got polluted and affecting the water quality. And even the air felt different. My parents were, of course, farmers, but they also became victims of a crisis they had no control over whatsoever. And here's the thing, my parents' story is not unique. Across Kenya, across Africa, across the world, farmers, fishermen, pastoralists, the entire communities are suffering from environmental changes, pushing them to bring along, different paths. And Africa and the world at large, we are all suffering in the same, in different levels. And yet, how many of us stop to think about it? Just like stopping to think about this devastating effect. Honestly, thinking about it now, I do appreciate my parents more. My parents provided a simple yet wholesome life. Fresh food from our farms, clean air, a sense of security. But stepping into adulthood for me over the past 8 years has been a stark contrast. Life now feels heavier. It's filled with stress, a lot more stress, processed foods that barely nourish, and unsettling exposure to conflicts. Even something as basic as breathing fresh air feels like a luxury in some places. And the world around us has changed, and with it, so has many sense of ease and belonging. Just thinking that climate change isn't just an abstract crisis, it's getting personal, and it's changing the way we live, it's changing the way we eat, and even the way we exist. But maybe like me, you want to ask, who is then responsible for protecting our environment? And the truth is, we all are, all of us, every single one of us, whether you're a policymaker, a business owner, a student, a minister, a director of an NGO, private company, a cook, a chef, every little action counts. And too often, we treat environmental conversations as someone else's problem, and not just conversations, but also actions. We think that that's the government's job, or that's for scientists to think about, or that's for activists to worry about and make noise about. But the question I keep asking people, and I would ask again today, is when we run out of clean water, when our forests disappear, when our lands become barren, who will suffer the most? Who suffers the most? And probably you're thinking, like I am, that it's not the governments, not scientists, but the everyday people, the farmers, the fisherfolk, the communities whose livelihoods depend on nature. And that is why, for me, I really have high hopes that this project will work directly with the closest people affected by climate change. And within these communities that are closest to the effect of climate change, I want us to remember that women bear the heaviest burden in all of this. In a majority of Kenyan households, and I think I would say African households, women are the primary caregivers. They are the food producers, water collectors, and traditional knowledge keepers in many societies. And when drought hit, women like my mother walk longer distances to fetch water. When food becomes scarce, women like my mother, women like your mothers, sacrifice their meals so their children can eat. And when families are displaced due to the floods or drought or desertification, women bear the emotional and physical toll of keeping families together. Yeah. But despite all of this, women are often left out of climate decision-making processes and tables. And so how can we expect to solve environmental crisis when we exclude people who understand the land the most, people who are affected the most? Women like my mother and millions of others are not just victims of climate change. I do believe that they are powerful custodians of biodiversity, and especially indigenous women, especially have safeguarded natural ecosystems for generations. But we don't regard them and make use of their wisdom and knowledge. To protect our planet, we really must ensure that women are the center of conversation efforts. And a lot of these conversations should be about conservation, and women, and especially young people, should be part of them. And speaking of young people, like me, if indeed the young people, like myself, are the ones to inherit this planet, then honestly, I really do worry about what that looks like. The rate of deforestation, the rate of pollution, and biodiversity loss is accelerating. Every second, I see people carelessly dumping waters in western rivers. A lot of industry are poisoning water sources like Lake Victoria. And even in big cities and congested cities like Nairobi, you find a lot of people driving cars that emit fumes into the air without a second thought. And if we continue like this, I really, really worry and wonder what kind of world we are leaving behind for future generations. Again, it is such a big worry for me, and therefore we must demand accountability, not just from governments, from corporations, but also from ourselves. I believe we must make it clear that climate action is not optional, it's personal. And as much as we need stronger policies and real enforcement of these policies and better education about conservation from an early age, involving children, I do think that we also need to, we also need great intellectuals like yourselves, the people sitting in the room today, people with, I would call resources, people with the expertise to support accountability measures. But accountability isn't just about pointing fingers. It starts with our own actions. And for me, this is how accountability looks like, and how I potentially project accountability will look like in this particular project. If you see someone throwing trash on the street, speak up. If you have the privilege of voting, elect leaders who prioritize the environment. If you're a business owner, please adopt sustainable practices. If you're a student, a learner, educate yourself and others about the importance of conservation. And if you sit in a seat of power, support the communities at risk directly and don't impose actions that don't work for the locals. You need to co-create with them. And in all of this, I believe that it doesn't take grand gestures. Sometimes it's the small actions and sometimes collective actions that lead to the massive change that we want to see. For me, I envision this project to being successful if it works directly with local people as champions or change makers, whatever we want to call it. And this can be absolutely anyone. This can be children, this can be young people, this can be people in the media, policymakers, indigenous leaders, the private sector, and truly giving them the tools they require to make the change that they desire, while also offering support. And not just resource-based support, but also moral and technical support. In my line of work, having worked with the CBO that is based in Kisumu, I've done so for the last 5 years, and this is what sustainability has look like for me, working directly with the people affected the most and really co-creating with them and listening to them. And currently I also coordinate a bigger youth demographic in not just in Kenya but East and Southern Africa, coordinating a strategic focus on peace building through a network called United Network of Young Peace Builders. So part of the conversations that we really get to have, and genuinely so, is what is sustainability. And part at the core of our conversation is the fact that we need to work with the local people and the people affected with all of these issues we are talking about directly. And as I wind up, I want to say that I really do wish this project will not just be another 5 or 4 year program, but really a commitment to safeguarding the future in the locations it will be working in across Africa and Asia, I believe. Because if we do nothing or fail to do the right thing now, then 5 years from now, I believe that we'll be finding ourselves in another workshop like this, maybe again in Nairobi, maybe could be in Mauritius or some other city, having the same conversation while the world around us keeps budding. And if I'll be invited to speak again, I think I might just wake up, take the mic, sigh deeply and say, well, we're here again. Yeah. That's definitely not what we want, and that cannot be our reality, especially with the commencement of this project. So today I urge us to take action. Whatever role you play in the society, please take an action and let it be a meaningful one. And to every person who will be involved in this project, I hope that you inspire the locals not to wait for someone else to fix their problems. I also hope that you do not assume someone else will take the responsibility to do so. And so be the one who does something, even if it means being extra about it. Because if not us, then who will take the action? And if not now, then when will this be? And I leave us with the words, the future is not something we inherit, it's something we create. Let's ensure we create a future that is sustainable, resilient, and worth fighting for. Danke schön, thank you, and asante sana.
Thank you, Grace, for your wonderful speech and remarks. It's important for us to hear today because it helps us in our follow-up engagement. The story you shared us is the story of most Africans, and your last remark, saying it's not now when, and it's not we who is the important thing. Thank you again. Saying this, I will ask the participants if they have 2 questions